Well, hello everyone. It's Matthew David, and this is actually my first live stream. So give me some support here. Facebook is a new thing for me, as interesting as it sounds. I wanted to come out here and just greet everybody and talk about prayer in the way that I know prayer. And we've had a lot of people that have submitted their names to be prayed for on certain subjects. And, you know, my story for prayer goes way back, all the way back many times in my life. And hey, guys, we're going to do it the way that I do it. And that's really the difference here, is that I don't pray from the five senses. I pray from establishing truth and consciousness first, and then allowing that beingness to become present and dispel and destroy the lies that are standing in the way of the happiness and the goodness that is always in the present. So, hey, Brenda, Brandon, Stephen, Liz, Christy, glad you guys could make it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to establish some truth, and this is very intuitive because I didn't plan anything out here, but I trust my knowing, and I'm going to go with this. So the way that I always set up prayer is I always establish the truth in consciousness first. And the way that I do it is with the understanding that, good to see you too, Brian, omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. Those are the characteristics of God. So omnipresent means that there's only one presence, and it's always present. So we know that the fruit of the Spirit is goodness, peace, love, joy, and essentially happiness. And anything that is not of the fruit of the Spirit is not of God. And if it's not of God, it's also not omnipresent. And therefore, it is not. God is, and whatever is not of God is not. So if we establish omnipresence as a foundational capstone in our consciousness, and then we know that omnipotent and omniscience are the other characteristics, the only power and the only mind, then we have to look and say, well, where's the problem coming from if God is all in all and God is the eternal presence, power, and mind? Well, I've been talking about it in my books, and it's all throughout Scripture, that there exists, like Romans 8 verses 10, my life scripture says that if Christ be in you, then the body is dead because of sin, but the spirit is life because of righteousness. And I believe it's in John 4 verse 24, God is a spirit. So this consciousness that brings healing has been on the planet ever since Christ discovered this consciousness. Jesus the man and Christ the consciousness, the oneness with God is atonement. So Phineas Parkhurst Quimby discovered it, Mary Baker Eddy discovered it, Lester Levinson discovered it, I discovered it, and chances are you've had moments of it as well. Because whenever you heal yourself of anything, it's the proof that omnipresence, omnipotence, and omniscience is self-correcting. It goes back to the original blueprint, designed for happiness, eternally in the spirit. So there's a saying that Mary Baker Eddy said, that there is no power, life, substance, or intelligence in matter, and all is spirit, because God is all in all. Therefore, I set up these three statements that I always do when I start my prayer. I never left heaven. I never had a physical life, and only the good is true. Now, I know those to be a fact. Having overcome the Lyme disease and the eating disorders and, you know, you name it, across the board. You see, those are all reports of the five senses. Those all come from what I smell, what I see, what I taste, what I touch, what I hear. And the five senses are rooted in a material consciousness, as in a mind that is rooted in matter. And matter is not spirit. It's the opposite of spirit. So if God is spirit, then matter is not, because God is all there is. So I dispel the illusion right off the gate of what's going on when I see something in my world like a lack. Now imagine what you would do if you had a lack in your consciousness. Maybe you have a bill that needs to be paid. Maybe you don't know where the money's going to come from. Well, the only report that you have that there is a lack comes from your five senses. So what happened in the beginning is called the Adam dream of consciousness. You see, you're eternally supported in omnipresence, omnipotence, and omniscience. But we took on a mind that created a body. And the body, we know, according to quantum physics, is not true. It's not real, because it's 99.99997% empty space. So when we look at our world, we're looking at an illusion. It's a dream. It's the Adam dream of consciousness. And the mind, through the 6 degrees of separation, who, what, when, where, why, and how, also through the five senses, creates all of the pain and suffering and all the problems that we know to be true, and yet there's no power because there's no life, substance, or intelligence in matter. So that whole consciousness is fiction. Now, once we've established and we've rooted ourselves in there, we can address any issue that comes up. So let's look at some of these comments here and let's see what we got going on. Hello, Brenda, Stephen, Stacy. Sabrina's on with us. Good. And that's right. Only the good is true, Stacy. So 3 statements before prayer, Liz. I never left heaven, never had a physical life, and only the good is true. Absolutely. That's exactly what I do. That's exactly how it's done. So if anybody has a need for any prayer right now, I'm going to go through some that are on my list. I know I had 17 people that signed up that gave me a blurb about what they want to be prayed for. I'm going to go through that real quick, but if you have one, put it in the comments section and let's go through it. Okay, you have one. Go ahead. You raised your hand. Put it on there. I just clicked like on there for you. I'm just going to wait for you to type that in. I see you're typing right now. So I can actually read yours in the comments here. I have a calendar that everybody signed up. So let me read that real quick to myself. I'm not going to exploit anybody that's asking for prayer. Well, let's go ahead and look here. And I see you wrote a prayer. Actually, you wrote a prayer. I see what you're doing. Okay. All right. And how do you pronounce it? Seri. You wrote a prayer to me. So you wanted great guidance, I believe, right? If that's true, go ahead and write true on there. And anybody else, if you want some prayer, go ahead and put in what subject you want. What do you want to receive? And I'll help you establish the truth in the consciousness, and we'll dispel the lie. Because what happens is when you destroy the lie that stands in the way of revealing the demonstration, then you have the blessing. So the truth is that the whole blessing has already been poured out. God's substance is already here. That's what omnipresence means. It means that anything that you're asking for already is right now. So we have to establish that in our consciousness. So I don't see, let's see here. True, okay. Feel free to read mine. Okay, Robert, perfect health and vitality. All right, I'll start with you, Stacy, and then we'll move on to Robert. So Stacy, but I have a great story for you, by the way. Stacy is a acupuncturist, and she helped me out at the seminar. She came to the seminar, and it was amazing. I ended up recognizing that according to my mortal belief, I had food poisoning. I did some silly thing, and I ate something awful that I shouldn't have, that was sitting out in the car for a long time, had mayonnaise on it. And what I did was I reverse speeched myself to find out what happened, and it said me sick, and then it said poison, poison, and then my mind instantly popped out, and I saw the belief, okay, because it's still a belief. Anything that's not of God, that doesn't bring goodness, is actually just a mortal belief. It's a dream consciousness. But it was really getting the best of me, and I was really doing awful. So Stacy helped me out. We did some acupuncture. And then I went to the room where, according to mortal sense, I was violently ill, dry heaving, throwing up. But the whole time I kept establishing truth in my consciousness, that there is no life, no truth, no substance or intelligence in matter, because God is in spirit, and spirit is all in all. So matter is temporal and unreal, and spirit is the eternal and real. And so if we look at what is eternal, it can never go from infinite to finite. So if the sickness that I'm struggling with is a finite reality, that means it is an illusion, because it's not infinite. It is derived from fiction. And so I don't believe the reports of my five senses. And what I did is I just sat in the truth as this was all happening. And then a couple hours later, the bubble burst, and I just woke up out of the dream. And that's the same thing that you can do, Stacy, is that whatever's going on, just remember that if it's not bringing health and happiness and joy, it's not the fruit of the spirit. Therefore, it is from the fiction, from the five senses, from a finite position. And what's infinite can never become finite. So God is the one and the zero. It is the one. We are the oneness. And the infinite is the zero. So it's the infinite and the one. And whenever we deduct anything from that, we take anything out of that, then it is no longer infinite. That means it is no longer at all. So if it's not of God, it doesn't exist. And what you have to do is you have to stand in that truth, knowing that what Quimby said was that there's a lie or an opinion that is rooted in man's wisdom. And it says in the Bible, lean not on your own understanding, but on every word, out of the mouth of God. And so what you do is you stay rooted in the faith that the Bible tells you about. You shall be able to, I read that scripture actually when I was in the room and I knew that I was sick. According to my five senses, I read that scripture where it talks about how you shall be able to drink poison and not be harmed. And so I stayed in that truth the whole time in faith. And what happens is that you wake up from the dream, as you just eventually it just breaks and you wake up. And so you do that with anything that you're going through. And that's what I did. And you keep going through that. Let me go through yours, Rob. I'm going to look at yours right now. Let's see what we got here. We had a lot of people show up. It's pretty cool. There you are. So Rob says to keep showing me the path he wants me to take. Okay, that's good. So the path that God wants you to take. Well, here's what's great about this, is that there's a passage that says, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know. So what happens is, look at what omniscience is. It means there's one mind, God's mind. That means that it's all-knowing. There is an all-knowing presence, because it's also omnipresent, that you are. But through the human intellect, through the human mind, we take thought for our life. And Jesus said, take no thought for your life. So if we suddenly take thought and concern and care over this body, over this world, then we are in that fallen state of consciousness. What I say, through the 666, through the labyrinth of the mind, through the five sense fiction. And when we come from that wisdom, that's man's wisdom, we will end up in a conundrum, because it's a repetitive cycle of thinking. And that's just resistance, which is actually unconsciousness, unconsciousness, and more unconsciousness. So the passage, be still and know that I am God, says it all. Because when we silence all of that thinking and we surrender ourselves to the present moment, then we're back in the present with the omniscient recognition, and omniscient means all-knowing. So in the moment, you know exactly what to do. For instance, when I step into this right now, I had no plan. I had nothing laid out of what I was going to do, because I trust infinite intelligence within me to know exactly what to do in the exact moment it needs to do it. And then that is the path that God leads you on, because you are in the present. That means you are at one with God. So God will lead you when you return back to that place. And, you know, man's way is the opposite. Man's way takes all sorts of care and concern for their life, for their well-being, for tomorrow, and they try to strategize and plan everything, and they're always scheming. And the saying goes, if you want to see God laugh, just show him your plans. And so eventually you get to the point where you realize that it is safe. It is absolutely safe to surrender to the present and stay rooted in that stillness without all of the crashing waves, you know, the waves of the mind. And that was the passage when Jesus walked on water and the winds blew. You see, Jesus, when it says he walked on the water, well, guess what? He wasn't in a boat. You know what a boat is? A boat is this body. It's material consciousness. It's a ship. It's a vessel. So when you were born, you were also considered a vessel in dry dock. And you have a birth certificate because you birthed out of a canal and you were handed over to a dock. And so Jesus walked in the spirit, which means he didn't walk in the five senses. And so he was in the spirit and he walked on the water, and he told Peter, come. And Peter got on the water, which means Peter got into the spirit, but the winds of the five senses blew. You see, the mind doesn't like it. The ego acted up, and the ego, through the five senses, made the turbulence start happening, and Peter got scared. So that's what the whole journey is that when you surrender to the present, your mind will convince you that it's not safe. It will get scared because the winds will blow. But just remember the parable. Jesus says, ye of little faith, why did you doubt? And that's the whole point, is that you should not doubt, because the power and the presence in the mind that you are in, because you are in the image and likeness of God, means you can never be outside of that likeness and image, even though you may suffer from a dream state of consciousness that believes that you have fallen from that grace. So that is the short solution. So Romika, health, wealth, and love. So since you just said three things, the mind triads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to address it according to how the mind does a triad. The first thing is the obsession, health. Okay, so that's usually what we think about, the first thing that comes to mind. Second thing is sort of filler. The third thing is the heart of the matter. So the third thing is love. Now let's look at love. Okay, God and love are interchangeable. You can use those interchangeably as words. Now, Romika, you are forever in the care and in God's love, forever in God's care and forever in God's love, which means that there is no other power in your world, in your universe, or inside of you. Therefore, the only way that you can be experiencing any sort of lack from that is to take something that is infinite, which is God, and to try to make it finite. So the original error, the original sin, was when we believed we are separate from God. That was the first error, the first sin. And we stepped out of that space and believed that we had to do everything for ourselves. We believed we had to make everything happen according to our own intellectual understanding. And we set up barriers by doing that, because what we do is we cling to the past. And I talked about in one of my recent YouTube videos that the mind actually rapes you, and that rape is relishing about past experiences. What it does is it keeps bringing up the past pain, and it keeps bringing up the past pain and bringing up the past pain. And then what happens is you feel it through the five senses, and then God, forbid if you speak it. Like if you talk about what the five senses are telling you, then you have come into agreement. You have come into agreement with the father of lies, because The truth is that you never left heaven. Only the good is true. And you are forever in the blessing. Now, if you are forever in God's image and likeness, God is love. So there can be no separation between God's eternal love and you. There's no such thing. And that means God can appear in your world as all sufficiency right now in the present moment with everything pertaining to love. So there is no block, there is no lack. And as you declare that and you step into that, you demonstrate it. See, all we have to do is demonstrate what already is. That's all we have to do. And it's a process of moving from fear over to faith. So fear comes from the mind through the five senses, believing that we're separate from everyone and everything in the world of duality and fiction. And then the more we lean into faith, the more we demonstrate all of that richness and that goodness. And that has everything to do with money, health, success, all of it, because it's all here right now. All right, so let's talk about, mine was in the calendar, Brian says, so let me go ahead and look at that. Let's see what you got here, Brian. There we go. Okay, so ideal job, confidence, income. All right. We're talking about income. Primarily, Brian, this is about income. So I get a lot of money issues all the time from people. And let me talk to you about it like this, Brian. I love to use examples from my own life when I can show you how I demonstrate this so you can see in a story, you know, your own life. So remember when YouTube got rid of my channel and they got rid of 3 years worth of work that I did, all of my videos completely shut down, you know, basically said, don't ever show up again doing this ever again. Natural health stuff, apparently that's not okay anymore. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but that was gone, completely gone. Now, what if I had to look at the possibility that all of that income was completely gone? You see, that brings fear to the mind and the five senses. Because again, what am I doing? I'm looking through the five senses at an error. So here's what I did, is I dealt with the fear by going literally on my hikes and establishing the truth in my consciousness. And I knew one thing. I knew that I have a covenant with God. I know that I've been tithing for over a decade. I know that I live under the Jacob covenant. I know that God has no discontinuity in being able to provide and support itself, because I am made in the image and likeness of God. Therefore, I've never left God's care. God doesn't have a problem providing for itself, and there's no other power. So therefore, whatever I'm seeing with my lying eyes is an illusion, because only the good is true. And so as I continued to declare that truth in my consciousness, in the face of what appeared to be, you know, the end of all things, according to my digital presence, what happened was, first peace came in. That was the presence of God. First I aligned with the presence of God. I felt the peace again. Then I had revelation. New ideas came. And then I've birthed 3 new companies that are on the way, like they're in the hopper popping out right now. I started doing workshops. And you know, lo and behold, it was actually a blessing, because God was calling me into ministry, and I do a lot of it through the workshops. And you see, everything that happened was in fact good, because I declared that only the good was true. So I demonstrated God's presence, and I stepped into it with faith, and I acted 100% on all of the inspiration that came, and I refused to fear. You see, whatever we experience in our life, whether it's a sickness or a lack, it's really just a fear that is being projected in consciousness for us to step out of and move into faith. You see, the world seems to be like this it's like a boot camp where we have to go face our fears and then remember that there was never anything to fear. And so that's what I've discovered over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Now, this wasn't the first time that I've had to look Lack in the eye. And you know what? I will tell you this, Brian, that 30 days after that happened, I actually made more money in that 30 days than I did the previous 30 days, and more the next 30 days. You see, it's all consciousness, and God is always in the present right here. In fact, I told the guys at the workshop, guys and girls, about the story that when I had Lyme disease and I was laying on the couch and I couldn't work and I couldn't, I was really in a bad place. And then all of a sudden, fast forward a few years later, and I was making 7 figures doing my own company, I was still on the same couch in the same space. So if I'm in the same space on the same couch, and in one reality, destitute, and in another reality, 7 figures, then what changed? Some people say, well, it was time. And I say, time doesn't exist. There's only the present moment. That's what omnipresence is. It's not omnipast or omnifuture. So it was still the present moment, but yet in one reality, destitute, in one reality, provision. It was moving from fear to faith. That's the whole process. So if you're experiencing a lack or a shortage, all it is it's a suppressed fear. And as you deal with that suppressed fear, and here's how you do it, you step into faith. You step into the stillness knowing that you are one with God, and then you listen for the inspiration, and then you take action, knowing that the only report of any obstruction or any doubt or any fear is coming from your 5 senses. And therefore, that's the father of lies. So choose who you're going to believe and who you're going to serve. Choose this day who you will serve. I serve God. I recommend you do the same because you're forever in the blessing. So I believe that was the correction right there. I believe that you should have received that by now because I felt it in my spirit. So let's move forward. So let's see. Brenda, could someone approve CM Cooper? I'll see about that. Let's see. I can try that right now. Let me go ahead and look. Let's go ahead and see who's on here. Just give me 1 second, guys, and I will. I'm just going to approve whoever's waiting so they can join in this. And you know, I don't see anybody that's trying to join. Nobody showed up, so I'm just going to keep going. All right. So Stacy says, yes, that is the truth. Thank you. Wake up from the dream. Dave Cattell, welcome. You're on here in Dulk. Good to see you. And let's see. We got Joshua Flores. How you doing? Forever in the Blessing. Romika, Brian. Okay. Sylvia, good to see you on here. All right. Just go ahead and look in through this chat. I keep up with you guys. All right, so she's been added. Ah, well, there you go. Sabrina, good job. See, Sabrina's a moderator, so she added. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go through this and see. How about in Dulk? In Dulk, do you mind if I mention what you have put down in your request? Just go ahead and type a Y in the chat box if it's okay, or put an N in there if it's a no, and I will go ahead and start with you next. If you're still listening to me. And Sylvia, do the same for you as well, Y or an N if you want me to. And Brenda, did you have anything, Brenda, that you wanted me to go ahead and to address? And if anybody else does, just put it in the chat box and I will go ahead and I will address whatever comes up. So let's see here. Yes, Robert, Sabrina actually is the best. I always tell people that I'm the Sheik. So have you ever seen, what was that movie? Sabrina, type in, what movie was that where they had the Sheik, where they got this guy and he's wearing the big outfit, and they say, oh, look at, he must be really rich. He's this guy with the Sheik. And he's really just wearing the outfit because everybody's believing in it. It's sort of funny. And I say that Sabrina's the guy behind the curtain. I call her Dembe, actually. If anybody's watched Blacklist, I'm Raymond and Sabrina's Dembe. So anyway, that was a story I want to tell you guys. So we've talked about, she is the engine of the car. That's right. We talked about money. We talked about health. You know, we can talk about relationships too. Relationships are in the same vein, because when you realize that there's only one presence, that God is the only presence, then you establish that in your relationships, knowing that the 10 Commandments were all about only one thing. They're all about honor. That's it. Honoring God and honoring others. And at the end of the day, it's really just about honoring God, because if you know that God is the only presence, then how you interact with anyone is really an interaction with God. And nothing goes unseen. Nothing goes hidden. There are no secrets, because there's only one power, one presence. So whatever we do is never unknown to the universe. It's never unrewarded if it comes from love, and it's never unpunished by ourselves when it comes from anything less than that. You see, we punish ourselves, because that is how we create, you know, it's karma, is cellular action, and then cellular memory, and then reaction. So what happens is we do unto ourselves. And that's why the whole law was summed up in one simple thing by Jesus when he says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Now, it doesn't mean that you should expect them to be nice to you just because you were nice to them, because that's not how it works. You can't control that, but you should do unto them as you would, because you're actually creating that to come back upon you. And so that's really the answer to relationships that I've discovered, is that the first 4 commandments in the Bible are about honoring God, and the last 6 are about honoring others. So it's really just about honor. And like Dr. Mike Murdoch says, is that whenever honor flows up, favor flows down. And the secret to supernatural success is definitely to receive favor. Favor from God, from whoever is the appointee as the illusion in front of you, like your boss or your mentor or whatever. They're really just an illusion to the 5 senses, because you're really only interacting with God. And so as you become a favor sowing factory, you start to receive, you know, or honor sowing factory, you start to receive favor from the universe. And that's what's great about it, is that all you really have to do is look at the seed that you're planting in the present moment, because that seed creates its own kind. And so another saying is that if you would only love more, you could love away every problem you had. Lester Levinson said that. Now, Lester Levinson is the guy who created the Sedona method release technique. He was an enlightened being, and he reached what he called the top state. It was the same consciousness that Phineas Parkhurst Quimby called wisdom. And it was the same consciousness that Mary Baker Eddy called, you know, spirit. It's really just the recognition that you are omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient. And here's what happens is you get glimpses of it at first. At first, when you really see it for yourself, it goes beyond the 5 senses, and you feel this overwhelming sense of peace. And you're totally present. What it does is it instantly silences the mind. And then when that mind silences, then you're in those still waters when truth just pours into you and it pours out of you. Some people call it flow state. You know, you've been in a state of flow at least once or twice in your life. Well, when you cease all of the chatterbox think, and you reach what they call, Lester calls the top state, it's so amazing. And I've noticed in my life, it was several times I've had glimpses of it. And then in 2013, I started to get more and more and more of it. And then by 2015, I was going for like an hour or 2 at a time with no thought. I could just be present. And now I do probably 80 to 85% of the day is rooted in the presence with no thought, just allowing and allowing and allowing. And it's really because here's what I did. I did exactly what Lester said, and I recommend you guys do. He said, if you would take your desire, all of your desire for this world, and stop doing it, and take all of that desire and put it on reaching that presence of God. Because, you know, seek ye first the kingdom and all these things shall be added unto you. But if you will take your heart and desire God with everything you got, and that's what I do. I really do. I love God more than anything. I'd give up everything at this moment because none of it matters. Because the eternal blessing, that enlightened state, that state of peace and zen and flow, whatever you want to call it, it transcends all of it. And just like Lester said, Lester had the businesses, the cars, the mansions, and all that. I had all that too. I still have a lot of prosperity. But you see, I don't have to try. I don't have to struggle. I don't have to fear. I don't have to worry. It just flows. And so when you reach that state, then it's the most amazing experience that you could ever have. And nothing else can supersede it. And it really just stems from your desire to want it. And when you, it's like a scale. When you want that more than you want all of the things in the world, and you tip the scales like that and you keep going after it, then what happens is that is honor. You see, that is the 10 Commandments. That's honoring God. Put no other gods before me. So when you really come from that place in your heart, looking for that, favor flows into you. And when that favor flows into you, that peace, be still, becomes your predominant state. And then it's less this, and it's more knowing. And then with ease, you can just have a thought, and it just shows up. For instance, today, I had this idea. I wanted a certain amount to show up because I wanted to spend a certain amount. And I wanted it to be additional. I like to prove that I can manifest at will in real time, instantly. You see, there is no time. So I'm saying instantly. Now, Lester said he could do this all the time. You could instantly create with a single thought. Because he says once the mind goes still, the thought that you plant is so powerful that it instantly shows up. And so I had this revelation. I said, well, okay. Then I said, I was on my way into a concert. And I didn't want to go to this concert. I was supposed to go to the Metallica concert. So I got out of the concert. And long story, I'm here instead. It's a much better time for me. This is more of what I like to do. And I said, I'm going to, $100 is going to show up out of nowhere. And I'm going to go take that and I'm going to spend it because I had these ideas of what I wanted. I'm not even going to kid you. Instantly, it showed right up. Now, 2 weeks ago, I did it 2 weeks ago, I said it was more than 100. It was several thousand. I said, this is going to show up because I'm going to use it for this. Instantly, it showed up. Instantly. Now, I'm not telling you this to brag. This is not like, wow, look at this. It's some cool technique or something. I'm just saying that God doesn't have any obstruction. And God is knowing nothing about a need. So one thing you want to reveal to yourself is that don't ask God for something that's already been given. Ask yourself this: what is God knowing to be true about you already? And start from that framework. See, when I see people begging and pleading like they need, I need, I say, well, hold on a second. You're coming from the five senses. You're coming from lack. You're coming from the mind. Instead, show up in the world coming from God. Come from a place of knowing that you just simply have to demonstrate it. And so that's what I wanted to tell you guys. And that was, it's profound. I just loved it. So do you think of the money or the desired things? And Dalk says, well, what I think of is this. I think of, let's say I want to manifest, I don't know, a large sum of money. Here's what I do. I root myself right in the consciousness of omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, one being. There's only one being. That's it. And I'm part of it. That one being is me. It's you. I am you. You are me. So, okay. Now I think of it like this. I'm a witness. It's not for me. Nothing is ever for me. So one thing I noticed that when people have an obstruction, it's because they stepped into trying to contain it, like they want the ego to have it. Well, if you recognize that you're not even here, according to quantum physics, it's all empty space, you're not even here, it's just really God, then if I'm just the witness, I can have anything pass right through me because I'm not attached. Anything that you're not attached to instantly creates non-resistance, and it creates allowing. And so that is the sleight of hand, and that's how I did it. So I saw a lot of laughing faces on there. So was it funny what I said? I don't know. I just felt like that was oh, Leora did that. Thank you, Leora. My daughter actually got a hold of that. So all right, so let's see what else we got here. Root yourself in God being one being. That's right, Liz. I'm a witness. It passes through me. Lose the resistance. That's right. There's never been a struggle. God is knowing nothing about struggle. God's knowing nothing about lack. God's knowing nothing about limitation. And when you recognize that that's the truth, then you don't have to try so hard. You don't have to try at all. You don't have to come from slave consciousness. I know that slave consciousness comes from arrogance. And I talk about it all the time. And I say arrogance is when you point your arrow, like your arrow, through the G. And the G is the gnosis, G-N-O-S-I-S. That's your earthly knowledge. And then you become a worker ant. Okay? Now, you have a lot of educated people under the impression that they are educated when that's actually trained ignorance. Okay? See, people go through years and years and years of study to become unconscious, deeply unconscious. Because when you look at a series versus parallel circuit wiring, you can see how the bioelectric flow in the body mind that we perceive as a body mind, it's just electricity squared. When we think in a certain way, we create unconsciousness, okay? When we come from problem consciousness and we try to find a solution, we add thinking like resistors along the circuit. So we get a resistor, 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 resistor. We're always trying to think our way. But Einstein said you can't solve the problems of life with the same level of consciousness that created them. So whenever we do that, we become unconscious. We increase resistance, which increases unconsciousness. And that's what they teach you when you go to all of the so-called educational system program models. Now, in reality, parallel universes exist, and they're all right here, right now. So all you ever had to do was to become atoned back in your place of power and demonstrate what already is. That's all you've ever had to do. And so when you approach it from that level, then it's a much different outcome. So let's see what else we got here. All right, let's see. It is trained ignorance, Liz, and even Lester said it as well. You know, what's funny is Lester went through that process when he was 48 years old. I think he had his second heart attack, and he's a very educated man. And doctors said, go home, die, nothing we can do for you. And he said, wow, Lester, for such an educated person, you sure are a fool. And he realized right then and there that all of this earthly knowledge that he had acquired amounted to nothing. It amounted to nothing. And then he really started to get true wisdom. And so wisdom is not education. Wisdom is a spiritual solution to an earthly problem. Okay, so the earthly problem is coming from the five sense consciousness, and wisdom's the spiritual solution to it. So wisdom is not what you learn when you go to a earthly college or something, because that earthly college was created by human minds, which educated other human minds, and they teach what human minds do all day long, coming from the five senses. So I'm not saying it's all bad, because it's good for memory recall and certain things. We can learn certain things that are in the world. But when you want a spiritual solution to an earthly problem, you have to turn to wisdom. And wisdom is outside of the five senses always, and it requires faith to activate a miracle. That's why Mike Murdoch says that only faith activates a miracle. You can't activate a miracle with your earthly gnosis or your earthly knowledge. And so that's the folly of human reasoning, is that we keep going down avenues with more unconsciousness and trying to get to the solution that's never been present, because there is no earthly matter. There's no material substance, and quantum physics has proven it. So we're trying to solve everything from Newtonian physics, from an idea that flesh and bones and physical matter also creates life, and that's completely obscene. It's not reality whatsoever. And so that's my take on it, and that's my whole take on the whole system by and large. All right, so Marianne Walls just joined. Wisdom is the spiritual solution. That's right, Liz. All right, so let's see. Oh, good, Brenda, you get it? I love that. Good, I'm glad you get it. So let me look through some of these prayers here that people were asking for. So Marianne just joined us, so let's see what she wrote. Okay, so Marianne, I'm not going to wrote down what you said exactly. I'm not going to read exactly, but I'm reading it to myself. But we're looking for some healing, basically. So, all right. I talked about healing in the beginning, and here's what I'll do, Marianne, because you just joined us, is go back and listen to this when I put it back up, because I talked about healing, and I also talked about finances right after that. So that'll be a good replay. Joshua, you asked, how can we manifest faster? Well, I want you to take a look at the question. Who, what, where, when, why, and how are 6 degrees of separation through the 3 kingdoms, which means that you started that from a place, that quest that you put me on, that question, started from a place of how, which I understand because that's how we write. But I'm going to correct it now because this is how I answer the question. So if you say, how can I, you've instantly stepped from infinite intelligence, okay, from the 1-0, from the infinite 1, you've stepped from omnipresence out of it into the 6 degrees of separation through the earthly gnosis in the 5 senses. And you can't get there from there. So, and you've also put faster, which means that you've added time, which there is no time. So I know what you're saying, but to correct it, we have to correct the whole structure of that to begin with. And we have to root ourselves in the present. We're not trying to bring anything to pass that doesn't already exist. Okay? That's what you have to understand from number 1, is that we're only revealing through our own frequency, through our own demonstration, what already has been poured out. The full blessing has already been poured out. So time is something we created. Man created time. So it's really just a movement of consciousness. Like I said, when I was on the couch, my sick couch, destitute, and then I was on that same couch with 7 figures, according to my earthly time, that took about 2.5, 3 years to get there. It took me about 90 days to get to 6 figures. But let me tell you what actually changed, because it wasn't time. It was my vibrational set point, my vibrational state of being. I moved from fear to faith. And if you ask me what specifically I did more than anything, was I was so excited, following my joy in every moment, regardless of the fallout, and just seeking the kingdom so all these things could be added onto me constantly and perpetually. And that really just opened me up to receive so much. Like it just started pouring, pouring, pouring. And I didn't even really realize how the time had gone by. I didn't even recognize. I just knew that in the twinkling of an eye, I had this idea. I acted on it, and then I had a 6-figure income. And then I said, wow, that was the easiest thing I ever did. And then I thought, okay, let's build these other ones. And I got so excited, and I was just in the flow. And then it went to, I just knew, because I was in the present. I just knew what to do. I knew what to do. I never doubted myself. And then one of the things I created at the workshop, well, I created this Swole Sensei shirt, but I also created a hat that says, you know, the F-U, like asterisk K, doubt. I really didn't have any doubt. That was the blessing inside the curse. See, the blessing of having Lyme disease to the point that I had it was that this failed me. I had nothing. I couldn't physically do anything. But see, that was my blessing, because this is a curse. To believe that you have a 5 sense reality in a body, in a human body, takes the infinite and separates yourself out of it to the finite. And you're living from the finite, projecting time and projecting in a series circuit. How do I get there? And when I had the bedridden sentence, when I had to sit on the bed for most of the day and I couldn't do anything, it was almost the best thing that could have ever happened, because I was becoming very present to the present, because there was no going anywhere anyway. And my consciousness started changing really fast, because I would grab onto an idea and I would act on it. And I started to really open up more and more and more. And it was really moving out of fear, moving into faith, and just really pursuing God 24/7, 24/7, pursuing God. If you pursue God, God will reveal itself to you. That's really what will happen. God will reveal itself to you. I mean, we're hardwired for that. We are in the present, so we can't ever leave it, and we wake up from the dream. So that's what I did. All right, so Tony's here. All right, so we already are. Have we done it? That's right, Brenda. Steven says, does 432 hertz bring us into the God consciousness? Okay, as far as I know, 432 hertz is like a natural harmonic that you'd find in nature. And Dr. Reichhammer, who created German New Medicine, discovered that when people had an illness, it started from the psyche, and they were unexpected emotional upset started in the psyche, and then it translated through the body in the corresponding organ, tissue, or whatever body system that had to do with that conflict. And so when people had a hanging healing, in other words, when they got stuck and they couldn't move out of it, he would play 432 hertz music and have them play that at night. And he found that that would move them from that stuck place and progress them out of it. And he said that it was miraculous in that way. So I don't want to make any claims. You know, I don't have any healing claims for it. But for me, I believe that it's the natural tuning. And it seems to be where the 440 hertz is like an anxiety kind of, it just kind of creates a lot of anxiety consciousness. I think 432 is more peace, more, there's a different feel to it altogether if you're very in tune with that. So for me, I love it, and I do a lot of it when I go through periods of hard stress and I feel like I'm under the weight of too much pressure. I do a lot of 432 hertz, and it seems to really just decompress all of that. So that's what I've noticed in my experience. Okay, so follow your joy in every moment. That's right. Okay, and then if you pursue God, He'll reveal Himself. All right, so that's what happened with me, I think. Brenda writes. Good. All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna get off here. We've been on for a while. I'm gonna go do movie night with the kids, and this is our first one, so I wanted to do this one, and I hope you guys got some good value out of it. And I know I enjoyed doing this. And really, it's just repetition, repetition, repetition. But if you keep setting up that first setup is that, listen, I am omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent. That's the truth of my being. And if you do that setup and you come from that place, then you have done the proper, that's the proper way to set up prayer. And look at the Lord's Prayer. Look what it says, Our Father who art in heaven. All right? That means spiritual. Okay, that's what it's saying. Our Father is not earth-bound, which means material consciousness, flesh, bones. Our Father is in heaven, which means spiritual, not material. Hallowed be thy name. That's wholeness. That's omnipresence, omnipotence, omniscience. That means that the allness, the all power, the all presence, the all mind, that's God. Okay, so it's spiritual and it's all in all. That's what we've discovered so far. It says, thy kingdom come. All right, now, thy kingdom come means I recognize that I am a spiritual being who never had a physical life. Thy kingdom come. I am spiritual. I never had a physical life. I'm in the image and likeness of God. Thy shall be done on earth as it is in heaven. That means that this consciousness will correct the 5 sense Adam dream. And that's when we come out of the spell of the 5 senses. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our sins, or so our daily bread means that our bread of life. It doesn't mean like give me some morsels to eat. It's the bread of life. The bread of life is I've been talking about it the whole time. It's that peak top state that Lester discovered, the spiritual consciousness that Mary Baker discovered, the wisdom that Quimby discovered. And I just call it omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence. That's the bread of life, knowing that you are spiritual, you never had a physical life. So the bread of life, in the way that I describe it, is that you are forever in the blessing. That means that God's presence is you. You're forever in that blessing. And God's nature is always increasing, always blessing, always good. In its perfection. The 5 senses cannot perceive the perfection. God is outside of the 5 senses because the 5 senses are finite and God is infinite. Okay, we forgive us of our sins, we forgive those who have trespassed against us. That means non-judgment. There is no good and bad. There's no right and wrong. There's only God. God is the all in all. So the only record I have of anything that's gone wrong in my life is from my 5 senses. And the only record that I've been done wrong or I've ever done wrong myself is from my 5 senses. So to forgive means to let go of all those judgments. All right, so if you read the Lord's Prayer in that way, then what you understand is you see that it's all saying this. The whole Bible saying the same thing. I can look at any verse in the Bible and transcribe all of it because it's all saying the same thing. It's the most beautiful book ever written, and it is like, it's the ultimate. It's the ultimate consciousness tool when you see it for what it is. And it's truly happening in the now time. It's not happening thousands of years ago. It's happening right now, right here, because God is omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, and so are you. All right, guys, that's all. Love you. Thank you so much for coming out. And see you guys Wednesday night if you want to come back. Take care. Let's see.